Welcome back to the Jmull Show on a Wednesday, twitch.tv, 110 Sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday. Right now, the Pacers introducing their new head coach, Nate Bjorkgren, to the masses. Being introduced, speaking for the first time as the Pacers' new head coach. Real quick, before I touch on what I've been seeing on Twitter about the press conference, let's talk about some of his credentials, I suppose. 45-year-old coach in the G League from 2007 to 2015 for three different teams. He was a head coach in the G League from 2011 to 2015. From 2007 to 2011, he was an assistant coach under Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse, who is now the Raptors head coach, when Nick Nurse got that job in Toronto, asked Bjorkrin to be a part of his coaching staff. He's actually the only assistant coach to win a championship in the G League and the NBA. And he did it with Nick Nurse. If that tells you anything about Nick Nurse. He was a Suns assistant for 2 years under Jeff Hornacek, and then reunited with Nurse, and then spent time as a player development guy in Toronto before Nurse was named head coach, and then became a coaching assistant under Nick Nurse for that coaching staff. Has chops as a player developer, including developing TJ Warren while he was a part of that Suns organization. Of course, now one of the leading scorers for the Pacers. What I'm seeing from on Twitter in terms of what he's saying in the press conference, for some reason my mouse is not working. Maybe this will work. Nope, that's interesting. All right. Do I have anything working? Okay, we're gonna keep going. It looks like we're good. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Kevin Bowen, he's a content producer over at 1070 The Fan, local ESPN affiliate, and Indy covers pretty much all Indianapolis sports. Kevin Pritchard of the Pacers said he was looking for high character, winning pedigree as an assistant or head coach in any league. We talked about that. Assistant. He won a championship as an assistant both in the G League and the NBA. Innovative, meaning push the envelope in modern basketball, willing to take more risks needed in the playoffs. Number 4, communicator and unifier. Bjorkrin on his offense and defense said on the offensive side of things, weak side movement, different guys handling it and pushing it, more possessions, attacking, utilizing the free throw and three-point line. McMillan was certainly, there were times with McMillan that you felt like he wasn't getting the most out of that offense. And this is one of my biggest things with head coaching decisions is make a change that clearly switches up the locker room in one way, shape, or form. And this certainly does that. With Bjorkrin. On the defensive side, he said disruptive, not going to be crazy. Defense will change quite frequently out of a timeout, during free throws, etc. He said, like I said, discussed an emphasis on the 3-point line and free throws. Very disruptive, very aggressive in style. These are all good things for the Pacers, and a switch up in style compared to Nate McMillan. Pritchard also said that he was asking candidates to explain what they would implement with the current roster rather than any roster that might be, because this is an interesting time for the Pacers. They have guys that are all relatively young, but at the same time, the future is up in the air. They're not entirely sure what Victor Oladipo is going to do. Miles Turner. Sabonis is awesome, and last year became a very important part of that offense. TJ Warren, and he always was, but really turned into a playmaker, first option kind of guy for the Pacers. TJ Warren, of course, really good. They have Malcolm Brogdon. They have this really awesome roster, but it's a little bit in flux, which is, it looks like something that Bjorkrin is going to be able to handle, and is going to be able to maximize some things for the Pacers. Quick shout out to, if you want to read this story, it's over at indiecornrows.com, the SB Nation site for the Pacers, written by Caitlin Cooper. She's awesome, and you're not going to find a story going deeper into what Bjorkrin did as a head coach in the G League more than this story. It's a really great way to look at this. So shouts to her, but she, looking at things like Bjorkrin coached a lot of different teams in his G League career with a lot of flexibility and exposure that the Pacers could really use. Young teams, teaching them to live at the free throw line and get to and not turn the ball over to a team that trying to get them to live on the offensive, to live on the defensive side with a gritty defensive team, manufacturing points out of stops. He had a lot of different teams in the G League, and that's what happens with G League coaches, because there's so much rotation based on the resources and the personnel that you have at your disposal at that time in the season. As you got guys on two-way contracts, guys being traded, so on and so forth. And that I think that's going to be really helpful for the Pacers. I think that Nurse has and this was the other thing I wanted to touch on, I think Nurse has a bit of a complex similar to that of Sean McVay, the Rams head coach, because McVay just busted onto the scene, and Nurse isn't the same in the sense that he's also really young like McVay. I mean, Sean McVay is 34 years old, born January 24th, 1986, so he's about to be 35. So that's ridiculous. Nurse is 53 years old, so it's not like he's in a similar stage of life, but he is in a similar stage of being quickly realized as one of the best basketball minds in the NBA. I mean, as a coach from 1989 to 2013, 89 to 2013, he coached he was a Northern Iowa assistant coach, a Derby Rams player coach, Grandview, South Dakota assistant, Birmingham Bullets, Talindus Oostende, which sounds like a Belgian basketball team, and then bounced around the London Towers, the Oklahoma Storm, Brighton Bears, Oklahoma Storm again, Iowa Energy, Rio Grande Valley Vipers. Then he got his shot as a Toronto Raptors assistant, and then hired as a head coach. And since he was hired, he's been an NBA champion, an NBA Coach of the Year, an NBA All-Star Game head coach, an NBA D-League champion, an NBA D-League Coach of the Year, all in the last 10 years. I think assistants, especially guys like Bjorkrin, are going to be in a position where they're going to be really looked at because of that. Because of what Nurse has done and who Nurse is in the hierarchy of NBA head coaches now. I'm really excited to see what this change of pace does for the Pacers. I think I'm not so sure that McMillan deserved to be fired, but I am really intrigued by this change of pace for this organization and this change of pace for this basketball team. I'm very intrigued by that. Bjorkrin saying, I wanted this job so bad because the talent on this team and the work ethic of this team. That's the really interesting thing here, and something that's becoming more common in the NBA, and most of the firings and hirings or separations of coach and team have been with teams that are in positions to be good basketball teams. The Nets hiring Steve Nash. The Pacers getting rid of Nate McMillan despite having this roster. The Clippers and Doc Rivers. The 76ers and Brett Brown. It's all over the place. And what you've got is this really interesting change of pace for a team that is trying to win now. I mean, that's not all that. I mean, Billy Donovan getting hired by the Bulls, not because the Bulls are, I mean, what was happening in Chicago was bad, but the more common thing this with coaches being hired recently is good basketball teams that are trying to get a change of pace. They're trying to maximize whatever it might be. So I'm excited to see what Bjorkrin brings to this Pacers organization, what this team looks like, where they're better, where they might be a little bit worse than they were with Nate McMillan. I'm super intrigued by all of it. And of course, we'll learn more about him and his coaching style and how the early days of his tenure as the Pacers head coach go as we move forward. We're actually going to talk about this as well on today's podcast. That'll be recorded tomorrow morning, and we'll get that out on Thursday to get Josh's opinions and thoughts on the Pacers head coach as well. Coming up next, the Dallas Cowboys are train wreck, in case you didn't know. We got finger pointing. We got a lot to talk about and a lot to laugh about, to be honest with you, because the Cowboys, despite making a coaching change, are still a train wreck, and in a lot of ways a bigger train wreck than they were before firing Jason Garrett and hiring Mike McCarthy. We'll talk about what's going on in Dallas coming up next on the Jmull Show, 110sportsmedia.com.